Good morning, everyone, and welcome back for our keynote session, keynote panel session, I should say, for the Investable Showcase 2021. For our panel titled Early Stage Innovation and Investment, Saturation and Opportunity. Delighted to be joined by a truly pan-European panel of early stage investors. And we're going to be talking today a little bit about how the early stage investment landscape has evolved and developed, particularly over the last sort of couple of years or so, and some of the most exciting sort of tech areas and technology areas across the healthcare spectrum that are exciting early stage investors. I'll be moderating the session today. We have a fantastic lineup of 5 speakers to put your questions to. So please do keep those questions coming in through the chat function. You'll see it on the right-hand side of where you're viewing the video. You can ask those questions throughout the panel, and we'll get to as many questions as we can towards the end. But for now, I'd like to ask all of our speakers for this morning to briefly introduce themselves and their funds and a little bit more about their fund's mandate. So perhaps I could start with you, Montserrat.
Yeah, hello. My name is Montserrat. I'm a partner at Alta Life Sciences. We're a Spanish located fund in Barcelona. We are investing in biotech, medical devices, and health technologies. And we are stage agnostic. We obviously do early stage, that's why we're here, but we can also do later stage depending on the business model of the companies. We have a pan-European investment mandate, although this first fund was mainly focused towards innovations coming from the Spanish ecosystem. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Josh.
Fantastic. And next for me is Tassos.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Tassos Constantinou. I'm an investment manager at IP Group. We're based in London. I'm in the life sciences investment team, and we invest primarily in therapeutics, early stage, pre-seed, seed, and Series A. And we like to stay with the company until we have an exit, be it an IPO or an M&A. For those that follow the news, for example, we were a founding shareholder at Oxford Nanopore, who had a hugely successful IPO earlier this year. Glad to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
And Katja?
Yeah, good morning, Katja Rosenkranz. I'm partner with BBio Ventures, a Belgium-based life science investment fund, but we are investing all over Europe. And I think what characterizes us is that we are really early stage investors. So often we incubate projects before we really start up a company. So we often start with scientists, an idea, and then try to keep it forward via seed round, Series A round, inviting other investors, building the syndicate to make sure our companies in the end can hopefully show a proof of concept in patients with some real benefits. And that's what we are focusing on, real innovations, not incremental differences. And so we are mostly investing in biopharmaceuticals, no medtech. And we just announced beginning of this year the first closing of our second fund. So we are just staying in investment mode and looking forward to new opportunities.
Wonderful. And Diana?
Thank you, Josh. Diana Saraceni, I'm managing partner and founder of Panacas. Panacas is an independent venture capital firm with 2 funds under management. The second one being just raised, 150 million, heading to 180, and investing in all segments of life science, anything from seed to pre-IPO round, and anything from medtech, the digital health, diagnostic, as well as biotech and therapeutics. It's primarily all over Europe, but also open to a couple of deals in the US and Israel. And about myself, I have over 20 years of experience in venture capital funds management. Thank you.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. I'm with IGTF. Hi, everyone. We are one of the largest early stage seed capital funds in Europe. We invest mainly in Germany. We focus on Germany, but outside of Germany as well. We have several investments across Europe. Usually we do ticket sizes between 500K and 1 million in the first round and up to 3 million per deal. In our focus areas, we are fairly agnostic. So the whole fund in 3 teams invests across all industries, and my life science team, we look at all medtech, biotech, digital diagnostics, and also material sciences, and also in some cases new disruptive business models. And glad to be here today.
Fantastic. So I guess to sort of to kick us off, as you've heard, we have a panel here with representatives from Germany, Belgium, Italy, Spain, and the UK. So a truly pan-European panel. I'd be quite keen to hear initially what you're currently seeing in your home countries. You're likely to be the first sort of investors who see entrepreneurs, the latest innovations in your sort of your home countries. So keen to see if you're seeing, I guess, an increase in any of specific areas, be that biotech, medtech, health tech, and digital, or indeed specific therapeutic areas or technology areas. So maybe in reverse order, Martin, we can start with you.
Sure. I guess we see innovations across different areas, but if I had to highlight not specific areas, I would like to highlight different events we're seeing. On one hand, the scientific community was strengthened about 20 years ago in our region, for instance, in Catalonia or in Spain, with new research centers, etc. So we're seeing now the consequence of that 20 years later, when we see a lot of really good projects spinning out from these research groups. So there's been a boom in the number of innovations coming from different areas, from cancer to CNS, etc. And we're seeing different funds like ourselves were created to really be able to take advantage of that opportunity. On the other hand, I would also say that due to an existing digital community, the intersection of digital or health technologies with life sciences is also rising, and we're seeing more and more really good projects with health technologies applied to either diagnostic, a lot of them, especially in these last 2 years, but also, devices, intersection with deep tech. So all those intersections among the different fields is where we're seeing a lot of interesting opportunities.
Well, maybe going in the same order we left. So Tassos, what are you seeing most exciting sort of innovations in the UK at the moment?
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So I think the UK ecosystem is interesting, and it's ever changing. When people think about scientific advances and innovation in the UK, they usually think about London, Oxford, and Cambridge. But what is actually happening is that we see aside of these 3 areas, we see hubs in the UK that are becoming more prominent in terms of innovation. For example, in the Midlands, in Scotland, and this gives us a more breadth in terms of what we see. Obviously, as a fund that's primarily investing in therapeutics, I can give you my views on that, which is that oncology, immuno-oncology is still king. We see a lot of things in there. Obviously, respiratory disease now, before and now, especially now with COVID. But I would agree with Montserrat that digital health is also up and coming, and obviously there's a very good reason for that because of the pandemic. In terms of modalities, we see everything, but again, I think along with the traditional small molecule or biologics, antibodies, we do see a surge in gene therapy, cell therapies, and I think this is where a lot of money and investment is going to go in the near future.
And in Belgium, Katja?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting because originally I'm coming from Germany, and before I joined BioVentures, I was working in technology transfer, trying to create spin-offs from academia, which was super difficult in Germany, I have to say, because of the grant system and hardly any funds around that really are interested in an early project. And when I then came to Belgium, it was for me a big surprise because the landscape, maybe because Belgium is so small, and actually we're talking here mostly about Flanders, everyone is very close. So you have the universities, you also have big pharma companies. And then we have here since 25 years, a development of technology transfer, which I think is one of the most professional here in Europe. And so with the VIB, we have also kind of preferred partner. So we are seeing first what was coming out. and they are financing and supporting excellence labs. So this is why we have very good access to excellent technologies coming out, just being at the transition to being implemented. And that's really fun to see. And in addition, there are a lot of funds that are also interested in early stage projects. There are pharma companies supporting the whole environment. And then also with the latest takeovers, we see more and more people coming out of Galapagos or Applings and so on, being interested in starting their own companies. So that's really a very exciting and prolific area here, which is yeah, a lot of fun. And what we see is of course now with COVID, stronger interest again in vaccines, which I haven't encountered in the last 10 years so much. It was slowly, but then suddenly with COVID, that was kind of new. That also VCs are interested in investing in these kind of modalities, because so far vaccines were always very difficult to develop. And of course, what we see is also more now in gene therapies, technologies going beyond CRISPR, and then also, which also reflects a little bit the research landscape here in Belgium, a strong focus on CNS, new ideas, how to go into Alzheimer's and very different other kind of neurodegenerative diseases.
Very interesting. And Dana, what are you seeing in Italy at the moment?
Well, a little bit of the same in terms of the main trends. A lot of new projects in still immunotherapies, as well as the most advanced therapies, cell therapies, gene therapies. There are areas of excellence, but to be able to go a little bit more into the specific, I think what was extremely powerful on the ecosystem, where the kind of the big exits, the inspirational stories, where for example, like AAA, the nuclear medicine companies that was acquired by Novartis for 3.9 billion, was like with some very strong roots out of the country here in Italy, was kind of inspirational for the sector. And we are now seeing several projects in the space. ADC is another one area where there is strong know-how and competence, and is a little bit back into in fashion, I should say. It's for some technical reasons, as well as vaccines. There is strong competence here in the country especially on the production side, and it's another hot topic. On the medtech side, I would say that the presence, for example, of a company that was used to, that's now Livanova, used to be called Sorin in the space, that was a national champion, inspired several projects, and it's still an area that's very strong and where we see a lot of new projects, as well as anything into neurostimulation. That is kind of very there are some application and indication that are also sometimes competing with therapeutics for a lot of neuro diseases. That's another area that's very strong in the country. So a lot of different targets, I would say, lots of different segments.
Wonderful. And Martin, I think you maybe have the sort of widest investment mandate, HTGF, as you mentioned before. So what are you seeing most of in Germany at the moment?
Maybe let me pick just two trends. It seems that several are pan-European, right? So so digitalization in healthcare is a trend that we see quite more frequently. I think in one hand, it's based on a new law that the healthcare system set up in Germany beginning of, I think, this year. So there's a fast track process for digital health applications. It's called DIGA, where startups can, with the pharma regulatory bodies, set up apps to tackle therapeutic or monitoring indications. And we see a lot of companies doing this. It seems that it's more a marketing race rather than content driven. And we will see how this works out, because the insurance companies the reimbursement for these apps is quite good. So insurance companies see a wave of reimbursements for these kind of digital solutions, and I think that will, let's see how this goes, right? And the second trend, I think, is as Diana said, we have some large companies here, BioNTech, CureVac, leading the development of hopefully our solution out of the pandemic situation. And based on these technologies, several other projects are emerging using the same mRNA technologies for other indications, like for instance for heart diseases and cancer disease as well. And then again, there are myriads of companies out there, but companies based then on project with these companies to work on new delivery technologies, because it's a prerequisite, right, for these technologies. And we see more companies working on delivery solutions for these companies.
Fantastic. I think we'll maybe dig into some of those sort of new areas, most exciting areas in a little while, but perhaps sticking with you, Martin, for now, and then I'd be keen for everyone to jump in with their thoughts on this. Obviously, a few people mentioned there the pandemic and what that's caused in terms of, I guess, how the market's developed, and this panel titled, saturation and opportunity. So I guess for now, focusing on the sort of saturation or oversaturation point, have you all, and let's start with Martin here, have you seen a sort of oversaturation of solutions targeted towards the pandemic? And I guess, what's your sort of reaction been to that, as, over the last sort of, I guess, 24 months? And what have you seen in terms of that oversaturation point?
Yeah, I mean, oversaturation, this will be, I think, the case in all countries, is, in diagnostics, for COVID, and also in new vaccines, several kinds, leaving somewhere behind the therapeutic treatment of the virus, or virus indications based on these kind of viruses. I would like to see more of this, but saturation definitely is in vaccination of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think what we've seen in our portfolio is that, first of all, almost all our companies tried something, did a side experiment with their technologies to see whether it has any effect on COVID. And I think that's fair. The pandemic offered an opportunity, and it's wise to actually take that opportunity and see what you can make out of it. We've seen a lot of new investment opportunities coming through to us. I would say, Martin, with us, we did see quite a few therapeutics. We did see, of course, vaccines. We did see diagnostics. Probably we didn't really see anything that completely was super exciting. Maybe we weren't lucky enough. What I did find was that in many cases there were, I guess, entrepreneurs were taking advantage of the opportunity and perhaps rushed their pitches and their opportunities a little too much. So there were cases where we saw stuff coming through to us that was not complete. I would call it was half-baked. And in many cases, it was up to us to actually shape and structure that opportunity into something that could be investable, rather than getting a proper investment deck in front of us, which was a little frustrating, but at the same time, kind of understandable given the pressures and the time frames.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, if we take into the context how this COVID pandemic has affected and has seriously hit different sectors, we really work in a sector that can call ourselves fortunate, right? In this sense, and we teach our entrepreneurs to really build your projects around real needs. This was a real need that we had in front of us, and obviously it's opportunistic. But on the other hand, that's you need to take advantage of where there's an opportunity. I agree with you. A lot of them, due to pressure, etc., were half-baked projects, but I mean, the COVID pandemic is so transversal, it hits so many things. First of all, with diagnostic tests, PCRs, we all realized how geographic borders were really relevant, and many of us how the need to be independent regarding availability of different kits or solutions. So that gave helped a lot of people to really start building projects on that space. On the other hand, I think the European community and also governments really had a lot of non-dilutive funding to really launch projects in that space. So that's always a help to really de-risk projects. And in the end, as I said, it's so transversal that it's not just vaccines or therapies, it's everything that has to do with the immune system, or that has to do with digital health and how you apply that to the patient-doctor relationship, right? So it has really accelerated a lot of things or trends that we were seeing. And I think it's in that sense, it has opened a lot of opportunities.
Mm. Well, just to add to that, more on the digital health side, one specific segment had accelerated in an incredible way under the telemedicine kind of grouping, particularly the segment of mental health monitoring, mental health tracking, mental health measuring with new biomarkers. And I mean, this has exploded because not only the digital, the trend to digitalization benefited from that, but also just the need increased 7 or 8 times, the need of support, mental health care, given that all the limitation, the restriction, the lockdowns affected so many people. And so all of a sudden, business models that are into for example, employers making sure that their employees are properly followed and offering them support to students, community, and all of that was still all of a sudden was kind of a new business model born out of nothing or very little that accelerated and became very, very impactful, and this is probably the new normal. I mean, this is not something we're going back from, and so twice benefited from COVID.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think our experience was a little bit different because probably also because we are focusing mainly on biopharmaceuticals. Actually, none of our portfolio companies had suddenly a slide with we are also targeting COVID. And I have to say we were pretty happy about that because I think they knew what their strengths are and they didn't lose focus. And we saw so many kind of new slide decks coming in, and everyone, as far-fetched as it might have been, they had a COVID slide, and I understand they were kind of also looking a little bit at opportunities and grants and so on, but it was actually kind of, oh, come on, please focus on what is your real technology, right? And fortunately this diminished now over the last couple of months, so these slides are out again and the companies are focusing in general on their real technology and science and what they actually want to do. So that's something I understand, but it was a little bit a kind of distraction. And then we saw really things that are not really thought through, also given how other therapies and things are developing outside, but totally ignoring that there might be already a couple of vaccines on the market, and it doesn't make sense to maybe now start a new program, right? So I think at the moment it's a little bit kind of refocusing, and I'm pretty happy about that from our perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think COVID-19 is a buzzword for the past couple of years. So yeah. It felt like everybody need to just add it somewhere in their slides, which can be a little. It's fun. But it can be a little frustrating when you actually realize how far-fetched it might be.
Yeah.
But I guess to that point, and maybe a slightly more controversial one, but with all this sort of focus and attention and everyone pivoting towards those solutions and those potential therapies or vaccines or whatever it may be, do you think any areas have been left behind? Do you think people have are there any areas that have been, not focused on as much as they could be because of this distraction?
No.
No, I think if I may, in my view, not at all. Actually, we haven't seen that, and I think this comes down to two things. First of all, that there's, I think worldwide there's so many ideas out there, and it's really hard to keep a lid on them. And at the same time, there's so much money out there that all these ideas, or many of these ideas, will finally get some kind of investment. So. At least in our hands, we didn't see anything left behind actually at all.
Well,
yeah, and
sorry.
maybe, sorry, please.
No, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, and then I just want to add, I mean, at the beginning when we suddenly had to go into lockdown, it was kind of, how do we do business now? But actually nothing has changed, also not in the speed of investments. Although you invest now into companies where you probably never have met the people face to face, actually it's working, and with the wealth and amount of capital at the moment available, I think, yeah, even more things are happening. So in that respect, neither kind of refocusing on too much of COVID, nor kind of difficulties in the industry to adapt with the new situation has in any way kind of course, the delay or neglectance of certain areas. On the contrary, I would say.
Yeah, it depends how you define left behind, because I mean there were some delays. There were some delays. There were clinical trials that were just put on hold. There were some procedures that were just stopped, postponed, and that's kind of catching up now, but still not going back to normal. I mean, we can't just say that everything was like invested and like any segment. There were several businesses that were negatively affected and catching up now, but it's just a question of delay. Probably everyone agrees that it's not being left behind just because it's like back to normal now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I will see a lot of meta companies that there's less money. I think that, but that's not because of COVID. It's because of the appetite of a lot of pharma companies adding new innovations, and the IPO window for even a smaller biotech going public. But for meta companies, with the value chain, with the logistic chains broken, they had a lot of supply problems, and still have. I think that's across through Europe, and that's really a problem for companies trying to enter the market, building their first devices, and having these kind of problems that they cannot tackle, not being located across the world like large meta companies. That's a sort of late stage effect, I think.
I guess sticking with that investment point, and maybe I could come to you first, Montserrat, on this. I guess sort of in terms of what the pandemic caused in terms of the investment landscape, but also sort of looking forward. We've just come off our keynote presentation where we sort of had a deep dive into some of the analysis of how the investment landscape has been changing and evolving. This huge IPO window, companies going public earlier, more often preclinically, larger rounds, but perhaps not as many investments, but in larger rounds. What sort of change have you been seeing as investors in the investment landscape, and sort of how has that, if at all, affected your sort of strategy as early stage investors? So maybe Montserrat, go to you first.
Yeah. Well, there's always a lag, right, when we start doing due diligence, looking at the projects, and when you end up investing. So we ended up doing, the larger number of investments throughout 2020 of companies we had been looking at in the previous year. But what we've seen as a trend, and it's certainly rounds getting larger, probably due to all these operational impact that COVID has had regarding delays in clinical trials, or in manufacturing, or doing your preclinical works in India, or etc. All these things have been kind of like shaken, and it's taken longer to get maybe to some of the milestones that to initially, that's on one hand. And on the other hand, I think we've all prefer to be cautious and go for larger rounds, and that was already maybe a trend to secure the funding for companies so that they really can focus to the value inflection point and not to be fundraising every other year, because that certainly has an impact. And that's what we've seen, larger Series A in Spain with like on a therapeutic Series A, 30 million. For us, this had never happened in the past, or Coa Health in digital health, also 30 million round. So we're seeing that also there's more money available for the sector. So I think that's a positive consequence, because that really helps companies build value much better.
Yeah, I noticed the same. I mean, bigger rounds, investors being more selective, but putting more money at work on a single round. That's pretty visible. Going earlier and earlier, because of it's a consequence of the IPO market also being allowing earlier stage IPOs, and then the VC step go one step earlier as well. And then one other thing interesting is that we all have very many more options for exit. It's not just M&A, that's the obvious window there almost all the time. Then it's IPO, and it's a transaction with SPAC, and it's private equity investors coming in as well, as potential buyer of our companies. I think there's a very nice selection now of options, which we not necessarily have all the time. It's really a quite peculiar time for that.
One of the findings, I think, of the McKinsey report that you just showcased earlier today, analytics, is I think that the rounds are larger, and we see this as well, but the frequency of follow-on financing is not lower. So companies raise the same, rounds in the same, taking them with the same cash reach, but the rounds are larger. And I think for an early stage investor, at least for us with limited resources, that means there is more money in the same amount of rounds. So potentially the dilution is higher. So we have to see how this develops, especially in therapeutics and biotech with large rounds for a seed fund, not to get washed out, even if you're one of the first investor in the company. Might change things, but we have to see how this develops. But it's interesting.
Yeah, it's something we have seen as well. I think the tendency to have bigger Series A rounds was already before COVID, but we see in the last 1.5 years is really seed rounds that you would have classified before as a Series A, like 10, 20 million seed. I think that was before quite unusual in Europe, which probably also has to do with the fact that there are now more bigger funds, and some more they have to deploy also better or bigger chunks of money into their investments. I think in general it's a positive thing, because we always had the trouble with compared to the US under financing and so on. So I think the sector is itself maturing. We just have to see how it works, if the teams are already that advanced to make sure with the amount of money they suddenly have in place, they can really put it to work. Because we are often speaking about seed terms, first time entrepreneurs and so on, which we love to work with. But I think there's a lot of things here you have to be with the company to make sure they are focusing on the right things and really making the best out of the opportunities they have suddenly at hand.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I don't have anything to add to what everybody said. If I may, can I touch on a point that Diana and Katja made earlier? Because I think it's very important. Absolutely right. There were delays due to COVID, and we saw that with our portfolio companies. As you guys were talking about it, I was sort of reflecting on that time when the pandemic started, and I remember it was almost like doomsday. People were like, we should invest now because we're not going to be able to invest for a year or two. nobody knows what the future is going to be like. And I think when you think about how the field and the ecosystem adjusted, it's quite impressive. So VCs found a new way of finding deals and doing deals. Entrepreneurs find a new way of pitching their deals and getting money. Very importantly, CROs found a way to actually go through the pandemic largely without being hugely affected. So yes, there were delays, but CROs stayed open and projects continued to progress. And of course, even clinical trials, yes, there were delays, but at least even there, we found ways to manage. There's a different way of managing clinical trials now. And I think it's really impressive how in such a short time, this whole ecosystem got together and found a new way of doing business. It's really, really amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we answered a question that did come through, which was about should early stage European biotechs be sort of looking at larger rounds in the US style when they're fundraising. I think we sort of covered that to an extent, but please do keep your questions coming in through the chat and questions box. And this is the perfect sort of time to start getting to some of them. But I guess moving now towards the sort of the opportunity part of the title of this panel. So obviously with so much capital coming into the space, and I think we have a panel later on the digital health space sort of side of things, looking at how much money is too much money in some cases. But I guess with the influence of capital, as Tassos just mentioned, the sort of innovation and sort of getting together new ideas, which I think is more exciting perhaps than it's ever been in sort of life science and healthcare space at the moment. Which areas are most exciting you all as early stage investors across any healthcare innovations? What do you see as the most exciting areas that you'll see having the biggest impact in the next 5-10 years? I guess maybe Montserrat again. I could start with you. It's a big question.
Okay. It's a big question, and I wouldn't have a single answer, but it's like picking among the children. It's different. It's difficult. But from what we've been talking, I think harnessing the power of data for different applications. That's just started, right? We're seeing, as I said, the intersection of digital health with therapeutics, the intersection with deep tech and devices, intersection with diagnostic. That space, we're seeing more and more really creative business models, value propositions. So I think that space has only started just because there's a need. We knew we could not keep, our healthcare systems the way we had them and cost-wise, and to really achieve this radical innovation that we need. I think everything that has to do with data, AI, etc. I think this is a space for innovation, and we're seeing a lot of interesting projects.
Yeah, I have to agree to this. I would like to find a new area, but AI applied to different fields is absolutely top. So we see a lot of projects taking low-hanging fruits in analyzing pictures and pathology, but it goes way beyond. And since we have a lot of chemistry LPs in our fund, we see a lot of digital optimization solutions or projects. For instance, for CMC, right? For chemistry, for manufacturing processes, for controls. This is, I think, this is the very beginning, and the industry, the manufacturing industry, chemistry, pharma, the CMOs are, starting to deal with this, and from remote repair to this kind of process optimization. I think that this is going to be interesting, and we see more projects like this targeted towards B2B, right, industry.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Well, I may add to open up to a totally different topic, which is the approval of the first disease-modifying therapies in Alzheimer's this year. So with the first therapeutic being approved by FDA, and even though questioned on its real efficacy, data and costs and associated cost and price, it does introduce a tremendous amount of opportunities in the sector. Just to mention a couple, I mean, lots of pharma companies are totally reconsidering their strategy in the space, because sort of a bar has been clearly set by FDA on what needs to be achieved, and it's a totally unprecedented, and some projects are really being make kind of more sense in this new context. And the other area where there are very interesting opportunities is all the area of biomarkers, because that would like identify those patients to be given the disease modifying therapy at the right time, and not at the very, very last minute when the cognitive decline has just been going on for a certain number of years. So I mean, it's an area that's very hot, both on the diagnostic and the therapeutic side, in my opinion, and we'll see lots of new ideas and projects coming out in the next month.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think there was already an interest in CNS in the last 2 years, but then with the approval of Aduhelm, I think that was a big sign for most investors. The FDA is willing to think about more flexible ways. So everything that was kind of before, like, yeah, but how do we ever do a clinical trial? And it takes years and years and years. Now with the acceptance of potential surrogate markers, being willing to lower a little bit the threshold, it's suddenly something that it's feasible for us to start those kind of studies, which I think is boosting the field of new therapies for neurodegenerative diseases even more, and hand in hand with biomarkers. And I think the other thing, what we see now a lot and feel a big interest is in gene therapy. I mean, 20 years ago, there has been a big hype, and then, yeah, we had big failures, and now it feels like, okay, we are slowly getting there. Not everything is solved, but it's getting more acceptance, and there are so many new ideas about how to repair genes and how to deliver. I think it's another very exciting field at the moment, and a lot of things are happening.
Yeah, for me too. There's a long list of stuff. I think with the success of the mRNA vaccines, we've learned a lot about mRNA and about vaccines, and in terms of delivery, targeting, stability, and all that. And I think this can be applied in different diseases and modalities. And hopefully, from personal view, as a personal interest, I hope this can translate into advances in cancer vaccines too somehow, because I think I'm personally really interested in that. I don't claim to be an expert at all, but I do get very excited with quantum computing, and I think in the future this is going to be going to play a big role in drug discovery. Clearly not there yet, but a very up and coming field. And you know, protein degradation, very, very keen to see stuff there. There's already a lot of really interesting technologies, but always ways to enhance that or modify that.
Fantastic. And obviously a lot of these innovations, I guess, come from across Europe, come from across the US. You know, China is coming up and doing a lot of innovation, especially in the oncology space, but more widely, and of course other areas of the world. Are you seeing, I guess, sort of more interest from investors outside of Europe in either sort of earlier stage deals or syndication in some of the Series A rounds? How are you seeing that sort of, I guess, global deal? Obviously, all of you have a sort of a European mandate for the most part, but you know, from outside of European investors looking to get involved and help fund some of this innovation in Europe, are you seeing an increase in that?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, so at IP Group, we are London based, but we invest worldwide. So, but even for stuff that that are UK or Europe based, we do see interest from especially the US, and I think this is the main reason why there's so much money floating around. When the Americans come in, you know, there's going to be a bigger ticket.
Yeah, and I would also mention some Chinese money coming in, especially on the medtech side. which was not very much the case until just before the pandemic, so a couple of years ago. But now, lots of deals that are closed, and most of the time they're a combination of equity plus partnership agreement, business development agreements for the Chinese market, with sort of a double benefit for the company. Very interesting.
Yeah, same here. So we see a lot of most interest that we hadn't seen before. It comes from US. From VCs, but also from pharma, mid-cap pharma companies looking for targets, and even direct investments into companies in their very special field in Europe, leveraging on the lower valuation that you still have here in Europe. And what we also see is private equity, building companies around a certain topic, for instance, in diagnostics or in tools. The private equity buying smaller companies and putting together a larger firm than tackling indications or certain areas. And that's true for medtech and tools, actually. A very new, interesting trend, and a sales opportunity for even early stage companies.
Really great.
So, well, yeah, we've suddenly found ourselves sort of around the time that we were due to finish here before our next session, starting at 11 GMT. So perhaps I could, I guess, sort of finish off and summarize by asking you to all, I guess, after what's been a relatively in-depth discussion on a number of points, but a couple of points to sort of dig in on and put you on each on the spot for. We sort of talked about some of the things that maybe were a little bit frustrating in the times of COVID, with slides being put in for COVID for no reason and things like that. But if I could ask you all to summarize with 2 points. One, what would you like to see more of from entrepreneurs who are pitching or interacting with you, or perhaps do better at, especially that early stages of that approach? And then secondly, out of all those things that we did just discuss there in terms of healthcare innovation, if you were to pick just one of those, which you'd say is your sort of top most exciting area from those. So yeah, what you'd like to see more from entrepreneurs, and what you'd like to, what you see as the most exciting area for you personally out of all of those we discussed. So perhaps going back to how we started with Montserrat and working through. If I could put you on the spot first.
Okay, sure. Well, as you say, from entrepreneurs, I always like to look for the right balance between the passion and the capacity to execute. So I would really like to see more about, how they present the project, of what real need they're answering to. Many times they come with a cool technology and they don't really have built the right problem they want to solve. So the right balance between a real passion for the why, the what, right? The what you're solving, the why you're doing it, but then obviously they need to have that combination of how you're going to do it, right? And how you're going to make money. Because many times, especially in digital health, that's something that they forget, who's going to pay for that, right? So that right combination, it's what you look in an entrepreneur. And regarding spaces again, or what would I pick, maybe I can see something different. Because I already mentioned AI, etc. But everything to do with the immune system, I think it's behind everything. So I would like to see more solutions linked to that, and neuroimmunology, immuno-oncology, infectious diseases. So harnessing the immune system, that there are tons of new cool technologies addressing that. I'm looking forward to seeing more solutions in that space.
And Tassos?
Yeah, I mean, we invest in early stage stuff. So for me, what I would advise entrepreneurs is the $1 billion opportunity slide is fine. It's fine to have that. At an early stage when we invest, it doesn't make that much sense. For me, it's more about, let's focus on the science and the impact it makes on patients. And sometimes entrepreneurs fail to do that and put too much focus on the exit. The exit is going to be there, but let us worry about that once we deal with what exactly are you trying to solve and how you're solving it. And the other thing is, try to make your story more concise. You know, I want to understand what you're doing with like 1, 2, 3, 4 slides. There's no need to go around discussions, long discussions to get the point. In terms of what is exciting, I will probably disappoint you because I don't have a specific answer, but very generically, but also very importantly, what I would like to see is like novel technology, something that is unique and something that is going to make a huge impact in people's lives, whatever that might be.
Katja?
Yeah, I think I will probably echo a little bit what was already said. For us as a very early stage investor, we don't need a full-fledged business plan or something. What is important for us is, on the one side, that the scientist, the entrepreneur, knows what is a key differentiator to what is out there. Too many are just focusing and seeing how exciting the technology is working, but forgetting about there's a lot of other stuff out there, and how do you differentiate and what makes it really better compared to what is out there. Because in the end, we're not going for incremental benefits. What we would like to see is something that really makes a difference for the patient and the clinic. And so this must come out of the first science. And then it's for us just very important that the people are open-minded, that we can work together, because it's a long journey, and that's just how we would like to work, how we want to do our job, doing something together and bring it ideally to a very good outcome. And yeah, I think we mentioned a lot of areas: gene therapy, CNS, ideally combination with biomarkers. I think there are a lot of things, but in the end, it's really about, yeah. A couple of years ago, you would never have thought about something like CRISPR-Cas and so on, and something suddenly is happening, and it's exploding, and it's opened new doors. So I'm looking forward to something that surprises me.
I know it's a very hard question, but it's always a lot of fun for people to sort of answer. Diana?
Yeah, my 2 cents, my recommendation to entrepreneur: don't forget the standard of care, to include the standard of care and explain what the need is. Not necessarily all of us are educated on all segments. That's far too broad. So sometimes we need to explain where the need is and to address what kind of population. And that is maybe 1 slide, but don't forget to include that 1 slide in the pitch deck. The other one is, sometimes that would be very welcome to have a little bit of financial angle, not in showing the financials at the beginning of at the very first speech, but to see to show that there are, for example, comparable success stories, that the idea of going over the journey for 3 or 4 years would lead to a certain point where there were other exits, and the other exit were valued, and what the drivers of those valuations were. I mean, to have a little bit of that sort of investment banking, financial angle conversation. I know it's a lot to require to early stage companies, but that would be really amazing, and probably open up more doors to entrepreneurs than they believe otherwise. And in terms of the areas for new opportunities that we haven't mentioned yet, and I wonder how comes we haven't mentioned robotic, which is very hot and driving up valuation in medtech, and which is for a trend that has been on for several years now, and increasing interest of investors, and the other sector that it catch most of medtech is anything that's implantable devices. I would say gets particular attention, provided that it treats a specific disease or conditions with some results, of course.
And again, last but not least, but Martin, over to
tough is on me. Thanks, Josh. Well, maybe one thing I would like to point out is that also founders and startups, companies raising money have to do their due diligence on the investors, and especially if you do go for larger rounds, you have to work with several people on the table. Then you will have a board that is not doing decisions for you, but really wants to work with you intensively. You might have to set up a scientific advisory board, a clinical advisory board, all those people influencing your decisions. Some companies that raise larger amounts of money think that some investors here deliver the money and be quiet, and that's not the case. So we want to work with you, and so do your due diligence on the investor. This can work out for a couple of years. And things I like to see more is more geared toward the therapeutic area. I think there are many more ways to do clinical trials right now. You don't have to do the typical phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials. You can combine clinical trials. You can do basket trials. You can do trials, small pivotal trials on what has been mentioned on biomarkers. That might be interesting as well for an early exit, or to get some strategic partner interested later on. So be more flexible and more open on ways to do clinical trials, and saying that even though we are an early stage investor, most of and all of the companies approaching us are preclinical. Think about clinical trials. That's the ways to do them.
Fantastic. Well, we did actually have another question that came through, but our next session starting very shortly. I would just encourage everyone to keep up the conversation, both with our speakers who might be able to come in and sort of answer within the platform, but indeed with each other. The chat and questions boxes are there to sort of start conversations and continue conversations. So please do keep on within those chat functions, especially for those of you who are watching at a later date, and spark some new discussion. So a huge thank you to our panel this morning, to Martin, to Katja, to Diana, to Montserrat, and to Tassos. A really sort of wide-ranging discussion, and hopefully really useful to all those who watched. So thank you all for coming in and joining and sharing. Our next session starts in 3 minutes now. It's one of our masterclass sessions. So just as a reminder for those who didn't watch this morning in my opening remarks, the masterclass sessions are hosted within a Zoom meeting, so they're meant as interactive. So you'll find a link to join and join a Zoom meeting like you normally would, and that's where the masterclass sessions are hosted. The 11 o'clock GMT session is on protecting your IP and innovation. So if you're joining that masterclass, please do click on the agenda item or on the masterclasses tab, and then click through onto that Zoom link where you'll be let in at 11 o'clock. We have several more throughout the day, and indeed lots more sort of panel discussions and debates and presentations. So thank you all again to our speakers for this session, and see you again at 11 o'clock.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Bye.